Welcome to Cracked Movie Club, the show where we do a book club, but for movies, which are like books, but better. I'm your host, Jordan Breeding, and I'm joined by my co-host, Jesse Nally. Say hello.
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 And we've also got a guest this week, New York Times bestselling author, former Cracked extraordinaire, Jason Pargin. Say hey.
Hello. I used to be the executive editor at Cracked for 13 years, and now I'm coming back. It's the equivalent of that guy who, as an adult, goes back to his old high school where he was a big shot.
I would say it's the equivalent of the Event Horizon reappearing around Neptune or Uranus or whatever it is.
Whichever one is less sad as your
metaphor.
Yeah, also, I will say of recent TikTok fame.
Oh, yeah.
I've had your stuff served to me quite a few times.
We could spend the entire episode talking about my venture into TikTok over the last 6 weeks.
You left and entered a new dimension briefly. Now you've come back haunted by the algorithm of TikTok.
Yeah, because I'm writing obviously here because I've written a book that's out right around now.
Nice.
Called, this probably reversed in my camera.
No, it looks perfect.
It's good.
If this book exists, you're in the wrong universe. It's another sequel to John Dice at the end, but you can start at this one if you don't have any idea what I just said there. You will not be confused. But I found out that there's such a thing called Book Talk, where all of the books are being sold on TikTok among book influencers. So 6 weeks ago, I finally was convinced by everyone telling me you've got to be on TikTok and I was like, I'm extremely old. I'm like 86 in TikTok years. There's no way that is a platform for like 15-year-old girls, and I frankly shouldn't be on there.
I've heard people have outlined in their contracts for publication that they are required to do some semblance of TikTok and or social media.
They didn't
on their own end.
Put it in my contract, and if they had tried, I probably would have just retired from book writing. but no, I went on there, and then it immediately became a viral TikTok sensation. My channel has over 10 million views on it, and I have something like 16,000 or 17,000 followers as of this, and over 1 million likes in the videos.
And you're doing dance challenges, right?
Yeah, it's entirely in stunts and pranks on strangers at the shopping mall.
Stunts and pranks.
Because I just observed what the algorithm wanted. So it's but it's very. I did not realize everyone had gone to TikTok. I didn't realize that's where all of the engagement was, and all of the people who, if it seems like Facebook and Instagram are dead, they're all on TikTok, it turns out. And I would say don't be afraid of it, but you should be. It's extremely alarming, as any new social network is, because TikTok, and again, I will not spend the entire show talking about TikTok. I realize none of you tuned in to hear me talk about this, but this is the one platform where you can't have someone help you run it, because it's got to be your face and your voice on every post. You can't. It's not like Twitter, where you could just hire a ghostwriter like the Iron Sheik does or whatever, to like just write jokes under your name, and nobody will know. It's like, no, this is TikTok's like, this is about your life, your home, your entire personality is up for judgment. Your body, your clothes, your face, and if you try to put anything else there, their algorithm just buries it. So it's like, no, we demand you personally, your time, your soul, your energy. All the time. It is like the ultimate manifestation of social networks. So,
well, I was going to say, Jason, cool. I actually brought up your TikTok in a meeting recently to point out that because we're experiencing something similar. We're always struggling with Snapchat, which is literally the single most important video platform to the company at this point. And as you can imagine, I'm not the best at knowing what the 13-year-olds on Snapchat like, but we're finding a lot of success with people watching, if you remember that series. It's like the animated thing. And it's doing really well. And it's doing a lot better than the things where we're trying to be timelier and more trending. And I was pointing to your TikTok as it's almost an anti-TikTok in a lot of ways. It's always like you split with some video of a woman grooming a horse, and it's an elaborate setup for a really terrible horse pun. And I was saying that, like, I think people are more used to varieties of things now. They're used to like calmer they're willing to accept calmer, weirder stuff than they may have been at the outset of Snapchat and TikTok. I don't know if you're fine. I mean,
for example, on TikTok, my longer posts do better than the short stuff. You would think we think of TikTok as being 15 seconds of something stupid and then you move on.
Right.
Mine that do the best are 2+ minutes, which is considered a long for TikTok.
Right.
And
Well,
again, this is me here selling a novel that's 150,000 words long. I'm trying to explain that. Well, actually, my long form content, my 90-second TikToks perform better than the short stuff you other rubes are putting out there.
and that's the same thing on Snapchat. It's the videos that are doing well are like 12 minutes long, as opposed to what Snapchat keeps telling us the kids want is 3 minutes long. That's like, well, sometimes. Speaking of long things, the ship from Event Horizon is so long. Allie, can
So
you
long.
explain that?
Sure.
The film that we're here to talk about?
Really simply, the premise of the movie Event Horizon is that it is the year 2047, and a ship that was called the Event Horizon disappeared, and it has unexpectedly reappeared around where was it? Neptune, in the orbit of Neptune. And so there's another crew that is sent to go do like a rescue mission / a recon mission. Are there anybody alive? What happened? Is there any sign of what happened? Why don't we go on the ship and find out? And it is revealed, or it is discovered, that when the ship disappeared, it didn't just like fall into a black hole or go behind a planet. It actually fully disappeared in like a interdimensional rift and went into a totally different demonic kind of dimension before reappearing and coming back haunted.
Yes. And for whatever reason, it's just a really quick funny thing on so it starts in 2040, it disappeared. In 2047 it reappears, but on Amazon the synopsis says 2046 is when it reappears, and I don't know why that pissed me off so much, because it's like, what is
not true?
How do you even get off by a year? It was just very inexplicable to me. If you're going to bother to put the year that it's in, just watch the first 15 seconds.
Yeah, isn't there like a Chiron, like right in the first thing? It's like the year 2047.
Yeah,
the year, just so we're all clear.
Yeah, it was very goofy. But Jason, why in the world, this movie of all movies, did we watch this? Why'd you make us watch it?
Well, I kept reading essays this year about Event Horizon. Reconsider. This film that was a total disaster when it came out has gone a cult following over the years. And the reason everybody's talking about it is because this is the 25th anniversary. It was since 1997 when this came out, the same year as Titanic, the only film that anybody remembers from that year. And so there was a lot of people like Event Horizon, reconsidered, going back to look at it again. And by the way, speaking of the year that the events take place, this is one of those films that's set long ago enough that it's kind of depressing, because the opening crawl is like 2015, the first permanent colony established on the moon.
It's like,
Yeah.
2020, mankind discovers faster than light travel. It's like, no, none of that. None of that's happened. So I thought this would be a good time to go back and watch it, because this is a genre that came out I think was not invented by Alien. That Alien was the first huge mega hit that established it as this is now a genre of movie you're going to see. Just like Groundhog Day was not the first time loop movie, it established that this is now a genre of movie you're going to see every few years. So the concept of a horror genre film on a big spaceship, where the spaceship has like a very impractical design, where everything is very dark and often wet.
Right.
A lot of wetness on this ship,
very
for sure.
dim. Yeah, and it's very and this taking advantage of what Alien established, which is that this is a great environment for horror. You can create a lot of very enclosed spaces or big open ominous spaces. Do whatever you want, and the ship becomes like kind of like an obstacle course to run from. And so Alien was a slasher movie in space. Of course, Aliens, the sequel, James Cameron said this is just a Vietnam movie in space. So this concept of, well, you can take any genre and put it in a big spaceship, and it's instantly like a little bit more awesome than what it would otherwise be. And Event Horizon was the first haunted house in space. So you get great lines like the spaceship is haunted, or I believe there's demons on the ship. So it should be a camp classic, but watching it again, my impression was, yeah, it probably should have been forgotten. Like I feel like a lot of cases, and this is not to pull back the curtain, but in our industry of content generation for the internet, sometimes it's just like, well, let's write the 25th anniversary will be a good excuse to write about this thing because we just have to write something today. Like we have to get something out.
Our content
some articles got to get done.
Yeah, our strategy is all based around numerology.
So I do feel like this is interesting because one thing you'll notice about that genre of movie I've talked about, and there have been many, some of them set on submarines, some of them set on space bases, but you go to Netflix, there's a bunch in recent years, like lower budget, there's zombies on our space station on Jupiter. Very, very few of them are hits. It is a very low hit rate. So I think Event Horizon, if nothing else, it is a very interesting study in why the Alien formula has been very difficult to recapture, even in the Alien franchise. There's been many Alien or Alien versus Predator films and properties since the second one, and all of them have either been box office disasters or critical disasters or whatever. It is a difficult formula to pull off.
So one thing that you just mentioned, so you said Aliens, they referred to it as a Vietnam movie in space. That's super intriguing because this movie felt to me like, especially because the ship that's going to save the Event Horizon is called the Lewis and Clark, felt like this is like to me, it almost felt like a Dyatlov Pass sort of movie where there's okay, so there's this like crazy disaster happening where nobody can see it, but there are people that are sent to go try and like help them out of this impossible jam, and they encounter these unspeakable horrors that nobody thought even existed on this plane. So it felt to me like it was sort of like a modern or futuristic retelling of like a colonial sort of story.
Interesting. I feel like one of the things that really grabbed me about it. So I was reading on I think it's interesting, Jason, you're pointing out that it is a haunted house, spaceship, or whatever, as opposed to Alien, which is just an otherworldly alien threat. So apparently the original script was more that they went on a thing and they came back and they had freaking aliens. And the director, Paul Anderson, but not the good one, he rewrote it heavily because he was like, you know what I think is cool is hell. And I think that's way different. And so he wrote into this concept. Now, of course, one of the characters says it's not hell, it's worse. So that so it's not literally just doom or whatever. But it's just this, I think that's what makes it so a little bit difficult to connect with sometimes. Cause it's haunted, but at no point do you really understand what the hell, like what's going on or why, or
okay, at one point they're like the ship is alive. They like say that explicitly where they're basically
but
like the ship has come back alive. I just want to say I don't know, I expected this movie to be like Demolition Man. I expected it to be like kind of corny, kind of over, like I don't know why, but based on the ratings and the fact that it was like a cult classic, I thought it was going to be kind of more like I don't know, I did not expect it to be quite so serious. And I don't even mean serious in a bad way. I didn't expect it to be like not at all tongue-in-cheek. And two movies I really love, unironically, are Contact and Poltergeist. And this is the unholy child of Contact and Poltergeist.
Okay, that's fair.
I really liked the movie. And I don't mean like ironically, like we don't have blockbusters anymore. Like we should go back to the 90s. Like I watched the movie, liked the movie, and then was like, oh no, was I supposed to have something snarky to say? I kind of really liked that movie.
That's great.
I kind of really liked that movie. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, and again, it definitely has its fans. I guess with me, when I watch it, it feels like they never completely landed on a premise, and it feels like this is a movie that probably needed a monster. But for some background, you mentioned the director. We should probably explain how this got made. This was made by, the script is by someone who has no other script writing credits on IMDb that I can find. And then it was totally rewritten by Paul W.S. Anderson. He is the director of, after this, the Resident Evil movies, Alien versus Predator. He made a Monster Hunter movie based on the video game that people didn't like. So kind of went on to have a career of like game adaptation, stuff like that. But at the time this was made, he was actually offered to make the X-Men movie that would be made by Bryan Singer and launch the current superhero craze that we have now. It turns it, like in retrospect, one of the most influential movies ever made, because it pivoted Hollywood entirely to all superheroes all the time. Like that was, prior to that, you know, superhero movies were very hit and miss, you know, and a lot of those properties were not like eagerly sought after. So there was almost like a sliding doors type situation where Paul W.S. Anderson could have had one type of career, but he wanted to make something R-rated. And so this movie, this was not just something he knocked off like, you know, I'll throw some gore in there, at least kids will watch anything. This was a case where Hollywood was rolling out the red carpet for him. And he's like, no, I want to do something weird. I want to do something extremely gory. And that's his own vision. So he rewrote the script almost entirely. Incidentally, back on the Cracked forums, we used to have this running joke that we would never explain, where we acted like Paul W.S. Anderson and Paul Thomas Anderson were the same guy. So every time like a new like Alien versus Predator 2 trailer would come out, all of our comments would be like, it's so cool to see that a guy can go from something like the Phantom Thread, which is more artsy, and then do something more commercial like this. It's interesting how you can see his various sensibilities. Like, you know, he really serves both audiences, and we just never explained what we're doing. Probably no one else finds that funny except for us and the 5 people who were doing it. But this film, the filming of it was infamously disastrous, because he shot a version that's like 2 hours and 10 minutes long, and the studio came to him and demanded re-edits because it was so incredibly gory that they were like, this is not going to be a commercial success. And they were counting on this to be a massive hit, because their big thing, Titanic, got delayed. Titanic's supposed to be a summer release. It wound up getting pushed back to the holidays, and they were scrambling. So he had to edit this movie in like 3 weeks or something, which if you've ever edited a feature film, that can't be done. Oh, yeah. And then when they came in and saw the cut he put together, and there was so much gore and so much, like, not just that it would be difficult to get an R rating, but it's like, this is just a turnoff for audiences. So they hacked his version down to the very svelte, like 88-minute version we all watched. Yeah. And part of the cult following of this film is a release the Snyder Cut type thing. Because there are people who say you can see hints of what was probably a really effective and really disturbing horror movie, and they made him cut so much out because he was trying to do like a Clive Barker Vision of Hell type thing, like full on, you know, this is a child covered in maggots type thing and screaming. Right. Like real, like actual, and they made him cut it because it's too disturbing. And then the footage they cut was not preserved properly. It was lost forever. So it could never be restored in a DVD release or anything like that, which the studio probably would have loved to have done, because that would have been an excuse, you know, 10 years later, 20 years later to
make some more
restore,
money.
Yeah. The studio, I read that the studio asked him to, once it started like blowing up on DVD, they went to him and they're like, hey man, you got all that stuff we told you to cut? He's like, no, I don't. Sorry.
Yeah.
You know,
but yeah, I mean, I honestly feel like I would have been one of those release the Snyder Cut type people, because like, I don't know, like whatever the premise is of this appeals to me in some way or another. We were just talking about this when we were talking about like what kind of horror movies I like, and like, I like paranormal things. I like haunted things. I like, there is a secret portal type things. Like I like anything that sort of feels fantastical in its horror, and like this kind of scratched that itch for me, because like it is a space movie, but the horror isn't the vastness of space. It's like we opened a portal to something we shouldn't have, and now something is coming through that we mere mortals cannot stop. very fun. And so like I was very into the premise, the story, entree, like and I agree that like the execution is patchy and that like the script is not universally like across the board fantastic. Like there are definitely parts of it that are better than others, and there are some deaths that like happen all of a sudden to characters you don't really care about. And so like I can see where this could have been a better movie. I'm not trying to say like my enjoyment of this was based
Well-
on the knowledge that it's perfect and impregnable, but like I still really liked what it kind of put on the platter. And I would watch the 210-minute version of it. I'm interested.
I will say a couple of set pieces were really, really awesome.
Yes.
But sort of, they had this weird thing going on where it felt like the CG of the ship, of the spinning ball portal gate to hell was I thought really held up. And then they were just weird. All the liquids were terrible. And
Liquids.
Well, I think that other stuff is not CG. I think that like that excellent spinning thing and like that awesome, like that with the spikes on it, their gravity drive, which is this hilarious gothic like H.R. Giger design.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is a great piece of set design, the whole ship. But I think you're seeing a difference between a physical model and 1997 era CGI. Because again, people forget this was an era when, movies like Jurassic Park, their CG looked so good because it was very sparingly used.
Right.
And it was very used in darkness and in rain. Like Steven Spielberg was so smart with how he used the CG in Jurassic Park because he knew how to hide it.
Right.
And here, like this is much smaller budget, much tighter schedule. And you see that it's that era of CG where some of that stuff is almost unwatchable because it stands out. It's like, because they wanted to do the zero gravity stuff with like how liquids and how fire stuff moves through zero gravity.
Right.
And the floating objects, like, well, we'll just paint all those in. Now, the other thing, to be fair, the people in 1997 were not watching this on a 4K high definition TV.
That's true.
Like it's very possible that on celluloid at the time it looked fine. And then how most people saw this on VHS. Again, 25 years ago was a long, long time ago. And so most people that have seen this movie in history have either seen it on cable TV or on VHS. And again, those effects may have looked fine on an old CRT monitor, that kind of thing. And it may only be now that, same thing if you go back and watch, restored high def cuts of like Star Trek, the Next Generation, you realize how those sets look kind of cheap. It's like, well, yeah, because 1986 era TVs or whatever, it didn't have to look like that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was just going to say one of the set pieces in particular that stood out that I was when he goes out of the airlock and they like jump and knock him back into the ship. I think I've mentioned this before like 100 times, but like my favorite thing about Christopher Nolan as an action director or just a director in general is that he does a really good job of taking, okay, if this weird premise, then this kind of action set piece. So, Inception, if a car flips and your dream starts flipping, then we're going to fight in a hallway or stuff like that. Tenet, all the reverse car chases and stuff like this. And so I love when a director is like, we're in space. What are the wacky things that you could do in space that is sort of only really going to happen there? And I like this idea that I think it's Lawrence Fishburne is like, all right, he's going to go out the airlock. I immediately have an idea. I'm going to go jump and knock him back in. Like that's their first thought instead of somebody say, just hit the button again. Just hit the button.
I like the idea
great.
that he's sitting there like, okay, what can only happen in space? I got it. The ghost of his dead wife is going to kill him.
Well, it's not across the board.
I will say, I think the production design was like across the board fantastic. I love the way the ship looked. There's also kind of a weird thing where like there's one later towards the end of the movie outside shot of Event Horizon, and it has like a main part and then like two little sort of antennas on the top, and it kind of looks like a uterus and fallopian tubes, and I have no idea if that's like sort of intentional with the like it's alive type thing. I don't know. Whatever. It's great. It's like very spooky and weird and H.R. Gigery and whatever. But then also because of the year that it's made, like all the footage is on CD-ROMs. And then when he's like crawling through the like innards of the ship, they're just like big what are those called? Computer chip pieces. And it's just like it's so funny that like our imaginations can be so huge, and yet they are still in some ways constrained by what we know about technology, or like what we tell audiences needs to not be so disbelievable that like they can't get on board. So it's like, well, hold on. I mean, the ship is in space and it can traverse time, but when we watch a DVD, it's like on a CD-ROM. Like, we don't beam it into our brains or something stupid like that. Like, we still have to pop a CD in. Like, I love that.
Right.
Yeah, there were entire plots of sci-fi movies until like 20 years ago based on the concept that Wi-Fi would never exist. It's entirely that's like we've got to get the disc out of the thing and we must carry it to the thing.
Right.
And because the idea of just to move information, you're just dragging it from that window into this window on your computer was not a thing until very recently.
Yeah.
But no,
it's like,
go ahead.
I was just saying, it's like a weird, it's almost like retrofuturism, but only by the circumstance of having been around for 25 years.
Well, I was just going to say really quickly on the design. I think the best idea was having Lawrence Fishburne's chair inexplicably hanging from the ceiling. It's one of the weirdest designs I've ever, because nobody else is. And he's like shaking pretty hard. And when he would turn, it would go like, are we going quick? Yeah. It was. He wouldn't
baffling,
but
to
amazing.
Leave the chair. He wouldn't just like stand up and walk away. He would wait for it to turn and then stand up so he could walk forward.
Yeah, made him seem extremely lazy. By the way, knowing what we know about set design, that chair clearly turned because there's somebody standing on top of the bar just turning it, right? Like they didn't build a motorized they just dubbed in the sound of the motor, but clearly that chair is just being turned by a stagehand up there. I kept thinking that every time his chair pivoted. But no, that set design is great. I assume the people that built that all went on to have great careers. Like anything else you can criticize about the movie, the sets are spectacular. It is just about perfect. And because they really leaned into this ship came back from hell, but it clearly was built like a satanic cathedral already, like at the design stage. It's great. Like it doesn't need to be explained. It's like, no, we are on a Clive Barker ship. And they just leaned totally into it. Yeah. If anything, see, this is what I feel like I would love to know, as with everyone who's curious about what the rest of this movie looks like that was lost, if it didn't lean into not to make it extremely like campy and goofy, but if it didn't lean even harder into, no, this ship came back from hell and it's now possessed by a demon, and it looks like it. It looks at the design stage, somebody should have said, hey, this thing is going to get haunted. I'm telling you right now, just from the way it looks.
I know that a lot of what was cut is so we see snippets, right, of hell or whatever. So like the rest of the crew being wrapped up with barbed wire, being like raped and horrible things. And apparently I think that's where a lot of the problems for the studio came. They hired a bunch of like porn actors to have actual, brutal sex with each other. They did a lot of gore effects there. And apparently when they were screening it, people were like passing out because it was so disgusting and awful. And
that's like the footage of the crew that all passed away when the ship went away.
Yeah, they see the recordings later, or when they have visions of what happened to the old crew.
It's right, because like again at one point Lawrence Fishburne's like, I know what it is, you went to hell, and the scientist is like, no, it's actually it's worse, and he has a bunch of flashes to whatever, but that was significantly longer, and I think a lot less sporadically cut, so that you couldn't hang on any one thing. Obviously they hung on like the guy with his eyeballs and stuff like that, but I think that whole scene, if you freeze a lot of the frames, it's distressing. They hired a bunch of amputees for parts, like they wanted it to be as disturbing as possible. And I was actually just really quickly on that, it is funny that he, we're talking about how Hollywood kind of gave him a blank check, and he wanted to make something that was his own. You know what movie kicked all this off that made everybody love him? What? It was Mortal Kombat, the first Mortal Kombat movie, which is a terrible movie. Another movie
Yeah,
that's
why
like,
did that get him a blank check for whatever he wanted to do next of all movies?
so this movie not so much, but he has an incredible gift at taking terrible movies and making an obscene amount of money. The Resident Evil movies, because I recently
Oh,
rewatched
we know.
all of them, right? Every single one of those is over $100 million. Some of them 200-300 more million. And just like it's insane. And I think you can make the argument that it's mostly based on the property, probably. But at the same time, by the fifth Resident Evil movie, surely people are like, if it was only terrible or they had nothing that they liked about it, they wouldn't go see it. But they just kept freaking going. So this guy has some sort of gift of getting butts in seats or something. And it's just funny that Mortal Kombat kicks off. He's like, I'm going to be artistic now, and I'm going to make this freaking horror space movie. Anyway, it's just,
I
it's
guess
fascinating.
Something
Yeah.
that I did appreciate is that what I assumed the movie would be was Alien, which is that we
Mm.
would at some point reveal that there was a monster and the monster was stalking them, and then everyone would die one by one in some terrible way from the monster. And then when they revealed that it wasn't that, I was just very delighted. Like I appreciated that it was a haunted house movie, Poltergeist in space. Like I was like, oh, that's cool. I haven't seen that. I'm interested to know what it is. And like, yes, it was sloppy, and yes, the tone is a little convoluted at times. And like I can tell that there is stuff on the cutting room table, but like just by virtue of it being a smash of two genres that I like already, and like in an unexpected way, I already was enjoying this more than I would enjoy almost anything else that was like, yeah, then the monster gets you.
I mean, this is
It's hiding around the corner.
this is my genre. Like this is a genre I kind of work in. My books don't take place in space, but the concept of people are trying to be rational and scientific and logical when facing what's clearly a supernatural threat. Like those movies, the versions of this movie on Netflix and all that. There was even a Cloverfield spin-off movie that took place in
Paradox.
space. I watched that one.
Oh yeah.
I've watched
yeah.
all of these movies. This is my favorite thing, especially when there's one from 2009 called Pandorum, which is actually one of my stars Dennis Quaid, one of my favorite movies ever. Again, guy wakes up in space due to hypersleep. He's totally lost his memory. Everybody else is dead. There's signs of gore everywhere. He has to solve the mystery of what happened. It is almost like an Event Horizon reboot. It's actually produced by Paul W.S. Anderson, but is superior in a lot of ways. But I watched all of these, and that movie had Pandorum had what I wish this movie had more, which is in space movies, one of the things that makes them pleasurable to watch is what people now call competency porn, like The Martian, where it's watching smart people effectively problem solve. And this is Star Trek, right? And so like Pandorum, these people that wake up, it's not just screaming and running and, oh my God, it's the devil. They're trained scientists. Like you're not going to make it into space unless you know what you're doing. Alien was like this too. Like they're working class, but they are good at their jobs, and the way they approach the problem makes sense. You like to watch them work. They're capable. That's where this movie probably it almost feels like it doesn't have a second act, because horror is about pacing, and horror a lot of times needs to be slow, because there's a slow realization as it occurs to you, well, what happened? And then you uncover things, and it's very difficult to write because you're trying to figure out how to dole out the information to the audience. Where this movie, like, man, they show up on the derelict Event Horizon ship, and the first thing that happens is one of their crew gets sucked into hell through their gravity drive. It's like that. It's like, okay, that feels like more like something that happens 60 minutes into the movie or something like that. I don't know if that's Paul W.S. Anderson, like his sense of pacing is just like, no, it's got to be like a video game, just boom, boom, boom. It's Mortal Kombat. Or if this is a result of the cuts by the studio, because everything else about this, it's a great premise. It's got a great setup. The idea that the ship itself is basically haunted and is trying to use the crew to like serve it in hell or whatever. I've never seen that. It's all original. Like that's not a plot I've seen before. And taking the way people talk about, the house itself is haunted and it haunts the minds of the people who live there. It's like, well, it's not, except you add the horrors of space, because with a haunted house movie, the question is always, why don't you just leave? And just move, move to a different house. Like somebody will buy it. And this adds the element of no, it's you can't go anywhere. You're in space. So all of
Floor is
that is
lava.
yeah. So here, for example, in a haunted house movie, any kind of supernatural movie, one of the most difficult things you deal with when you're writing it is trying to figure out at what point do the main characters accept that we're dealing with a ghost or Bigfoot or whatever supernatural thing. Right? Because the whole issue is that your audience already knows it's a ghost or whatever. Like they know it's demons because they've seen the trailer. They know. So every minute that your main characters remain skeptical is kind of wasted time. And I think we've all seen a horror movie where 75 minutes into it, there's still one of the protagonists like, well, I, for one, don't believe in vampires. It's like,
Yeah.
you've seen now 6 people explode when we stab them in the heart and when sunlight hit them. It's like, why don't you just accept it? And it's one of my annoyances because it's like, I get it that in real life, it would be very difficult. Like if the 4 of us were attacked by vampires while trying to record this, it would take us a long time to come around to the concept that vampires are real. I get it.
Sure.
But in a fictional movie, so here I think it's 55 minutes in when Lawrence Fishburne has the conversation with Sam Neill's character. And Lawrence Fishburne is like, I'm pretty sure the ship has been to hell and back. That's what he expects with it. And the transition from we're trying to investigate what happened to the ship and its crew to, okay, we're now fighting a demon. It kind of happens across like all at once. I don't know. It's weird. I don't feel, this is where I feel like it misses the extra time because I feel like hints should have been doled out more slowly. And that would have made the ending scarier for me because the people who got killed, you know them more. You know, it's something that the Alien pulled off so well, like the camaraderie with the crew and how much you got to like them before that thing burst out of that guy's chest. And again, that's where I think it may just be the edit that was the problem.
There's hints of it in here where like the crew have nicknames for each other, which sometimes to me in bad writing just seems like, see, how could they not like each other if they call each other Baby Bear and Mama Bear? I mean, like,
yeah, they have to be friends if they're calling this guy the Funky Spaceman.
Exactly. How would we ever know to call Samuel Funky Spaceman if we weren't good friends? Which is like, again, could have been remnants of good writing, but it on its own feels like bad writing. It feels like bad writing.
I think Sorry, I was just going to say, Jason, I think that's a really good point, just in the sense that you kind of want them to at some point come around so that they can. I was actually just writing a video script, and one of the things that's annoying about some horror movies is nobody ever bothers to come up with anything creative. The thing I was talking about was how in like every horror thing now, people have to Google what the monster is. You know, they're like, being attacked by.
Well, they used to go to Microfiche, and now they go to Google.
I know. I know it's like, it's a common thing, right? Like they're always in libraries, like being attacked by scary thing. But like, I think a great example of what you're even kind of talking about is like in It Follows, at a certain point, it doesn't make any sense that an invisible sex monster is chasing them, but they come up with strategies. They're like, whatever, it's an invisible sex monster. So they come up with several different ways to say, you know, if invisible, I mean, at the very beginning of the movie, the guy has sex with her because he's like, I'm being chased by an invisible sex monster. And he's like, I don't get it. I'm not going to try and explain it, but knowing how this is going down, I'm going to work in that capacity and try and solve this invisible sex monster problem that I apparently have found myself dealing with. And I think maybe that's the Christopher Nolan thing. It's like, well, if I'm going to be in a dream fighting, then here are the ways that I would solve that. I think that's the thing is I never got a grasp of, all right, so you're being attacked by hell. What do you do? And it seems like the main thing that they come up with is escape, which
blow it up.
Yeah, or blow it up, which granted, but also talk about the impractical design of the ship. It's made to blow itself in half if anything goes wrong.
Yeah.
That's one of the weirdest ideas. And why didn't
it's hard to imagine the insurance company going along with it.
Yeah. But then again, Titanic, which came out this year, there's a whole thing about they knew that ship could sink and they were going to get insurance money out of it. So I don't know, improbable things have happened.
They didn't load it with explosives and have like a front half and a second half, and it's like, but
Yeah, no, they just made the bottom of the ship a series of death traps.
I think that's the thing that I wanted from the movie. To your point, Jason, I think it's really valid, which is nobody really knows what they're doing other than trying to kind of get out of there. And even those things, we don't really have a capacity. It's like, oh, we got to weld the ship, and it's like, yeah, sure. But there wasn't a lot of like, not that it should be this, but they're not like, maybe we should go to hell and blow up the capital, or not that it should be that involved, but like you wanted some sort of progress, smart people saying, all right, fine, it's hell, what do we do? Do we carry a crucifix around? Do we what do we do other than
okay
run?
you try coming up with a plan when you're being haunted by your still alive but estranged son.
Yeah, exactly.
Your nude wife.
You try and think when you're haunted by your nude wife. I do think like when you do see a horror movie that moves fast and is effective, it is so exciting because it defies your expectations of horror movies. Like to your point, Jason, of saying like, usually it's like a dawning realization or the horror is a creeping thing. And then suddenly we like, bang, we get to like, 2/3 of the way through the movie. And suddenly it's like go time when it comes to like conflict solving. We were just talking about Barbarian, which I will not say spoilers for in case people haven't seen it for this one, but like that's an example of a movie that is like playing with structure. So it has like an extremely fast first third. The first act is like fast. And the other one that I think is a good example is Insidious. Have people seen Insidious?
Sure. I haven't actually.
Okay. Do you mind if I spoil a little bit of Insidious to talk about
No.
it? That's a really good example of that question of, well, if the house is haunted, why not move? That is exactly what happens. They move into the house, they see some creepy shit. The family goes, whoa, we've only been here for 2 weeks. I haven't even paid my first mortgage payment. They move. They move immediately. Like the movie answers that question of just being like, if you were a smart family with a young son and a baby, wouldn't you move? And they go, yes, I would. And they move. And then what happens in the next house is that the haunting follows them. And I won't spoil why in case you want to see the movie because it's very fun. But it goes ahead and moves quickly and answers that question for you. And so you as the audience member go, okay, well, everything that I just kind of pre-wrote in my head as what would I do if I was the mom in this situation? Or if I was the writer of this movie, what do I think is going to happen next? You immediately get it all just like, shut. It's like knocked off the table. I think that's really fun. It's like anytime that you can kind of have that moment as an audience member where you have to start back over at square one and the movie's totally ahead of you is like such a fun gift.
I have a quick question. His wife, Sam Neill's wife, wasn't on the ship, right?
No.
See, that's the thing.
I think she was long dead too.
What
Am I wrong?
Maybe what I wanted from the movie, I think, was the reason that he was so adamant that this isn't hell, that this is science explained, we have to stay, is because his wife got sucked into hell on the ship. Like that's what I kept expecting, like some weird reveal that she's there actually somewhere, but haunted and dead or whatever. But for some reason, I think I just got that so hung up that I didn't understand why he gave so much of a shit other than that he was his science baby. But I'm like, if you really cared, why didn't you go on the ship in the first place?
Well, the ship was haunting all of them with visions of people they had wronged or let down in the past and had abandoned, because this is where it feels like the bones of such a very smart story. For those of you out there, there's people listening to this who love this movie. I see why. I do see why. Because my disappointment in it is not that the movie is terrible. I can name 10 things I like a lot, including Samuel L. Jackson's performance, including the set design, costume design. So the concept of these people go into space, by nature, they're adventurers and they've all left people behind. Like they've all abandoned families in pursuit of a career, in pursuit of whatever caused them to join the Space Force or Federation or whatever they call the organization here in the future. So then when it starts taunting them with, these people need you, and it's like this is this writer's conception of hell. It's where your own guilt is what invades your mind. And so the threat is where other members of the crew have become possessed. and start attacking each other, rather than there just being a tentacle monster on board, rather than whatever. And that's all great stuff. Like, that's all great haunted house stuff, because again, it's like The Shining, right? There's no monster. The house is a monster, but it's what it does to the mind of the guy, Jack Nicholson, or that of course was the character's name in the book. And
Johnny,
so
something with Johnny.
it and it ties into all these themes of, obviously The Shining is a metaphor for alcoholism and abusive spouses and things like that, like not being able to escape a marriage. So here, like, you've got room to have this be a metaphor of, these career-driven military people, or whatever the equivalent is, in the present, and all the people who they've left behind, or are suffering, or have died, or gotten sick, or whatever, and they weren't there for them. And then, you've got all of these psychological and emotional themes that plays in. But talking about, like you said, it seemed like in the end it wasn't totally clear what the characters had to do, or what they were trying to accomplish, versus what the ship was trying to do, which I guess ultimately it was just trying to take them back to hell, and they were trying to not be taken back to hell with the ship.
Yeah.
But the climactic fight is Lawrence Fishburne fighting around the spinny spike Gravitron thing. He starts out fighting the memory or ghost or manifestation of this crew member he left behind to burn alive slowly in a ship, because they couldn't get to him, and that haunts him. So he's having to fight this memory, this guilt, and the metaphor is great. Like, this is great screenwriting stuff. But then partway through the fight, the guy transforms into Sam Neill's character, who we had established as the antagonist prior to this, because he's like the designer of the ship, who at some point has become so thoroughly possessed that he's decided, no, actually, it's good that this ship wants to go to hell. Like, I'm in favor of it. Let's do that.
Right.
That was a change that was made after test screenings. Originally, the fight was just Lawrence Fishburne against this memory that had been haunting him, and audiences were like, well, where's Sam Neill? It's like, well, he got blasted into space. He's already dead. It's like, no.
Yeah, it's like, he already pulled his eyeballs out. What do you want from him?
Yeah, no, we want him to fight the main bad guy. Why do we care about this flaming memory he's fighting? This is like a hallucination, isn't it? And it's like, well, I can see the writer saying, no, this is a metaphor for him fighting his own guilt. To escape hell, he has to forgive himself and redeem, like, to fight against this own memory that he blames himself from. So, like, the hell that people put themselves into is really their own being unable to let go of things that actually weren't necessarily their fault, and being able to move on. And so it symbolizes him being able to move on. And the test audience is like,
no, we just want to see the handsome guy.
Yeah, can we just see him fight, please?
When is he going to fight the monster? And so they had to redo it. So they had like a line where Sam Neill's like, aha, it was me all along. You didn't really think you could kill me. I have disguised myself as this memory.
Yeah.
Right. And then they have a fist fight that ends with the ship. It shockingly, the Chekhov's gun of, that's weird. This entire ship is lined with explosives. My favorite thing would have been if they had just never come into play.
Yeah.
Right.
If they had just noticed it. And like the final shot in the movie is just like, it's a good thing those never went off. That would have been a disaster.
Whoever built that was a real freak.
That's actually, it's interesting that changed after test screenings. I wonder if it became really rushed because the sound effects during that particular fight, like the part where he's fighting Sam Neill, is so goofy.
Yeah.
A lot of like
I
just really splatty, odd sound effects that I didn't notice. It wasn't something that I noticed throughout. So I wonder if that was one of those like, oh my God, we can't hire the sound guy again. We got to go to whatever stock sound.
Footage. No, you're right. Yeah. And also, like, some of the sound effects in the movie were actually very effective. There was a lot of like bone crushing, falling from great height sound effects that were very gory and very real. And so I agree. It was sort of weird when it was like, pack. And it was like, oh yeah, those don't feel in the world of the movie that we've set up so far.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's good. I actually think then maybe to emphasize that point even further, Jason, they could have had, I think so. Sam Neill obviously does this, but I wish there was a clearer. So if these are all people that have sacrificed their families for their career, I wish they were a little more dedicated to the job. It really doesn't take very long for Lawrence Fishburne, the captain, the skipper, to be like, "Nah, we're out. There's nothing to save here. It's freaking me out. I don't like it. We're getting out as soon as we can." You know what I mean? Like they're pretty quick to be like, "Our careers aren't worth it," even though that's kind of the thing that's been set up. We've sacrificed our crippled children and our naked wives, but I'm out.
Well, for example, they, of course, they arrived at the Event Horizon on their own ship, and so
Right.
obviously you have to dispense with the ship that could take them home. So there's a point where their own ship has been damaged, and they're like asking the crew, like, "Oh, no, you all now have to come on board the Event Horizon," and they're like, "We're not coming on there. That ship is haunted.
Yeah.
It's like, we're not going to come to your haunted ass ship. We're
Yeah.
staying here." It's like, "No, you have to get off it. There's a rupture in the hull or whatever. We
Yeah.
all have to pile onto the haunted. We all have to get in the haunted ship." But
Yeah, they
that's
accept immediately that this is a ship I don't want to be on, and the mission sucks, and I don't want to be here. Yeah,
But I like
but
to that point of like what we were talking about with like competent people or smart people. Like I do like when people in movies act that way because if they don't, there's a level of, at least for me when I'm watching a horror movie, if somebody acts so wildly away from my own instincts, I actually lose a little bit of fear in the film because that
yes.
human thing in my brain turns on of, well, couldn't be me. Even if it's like a thing that's simply couldn't be me because it doesn't exist because it's like a hell demon from space. You need in to me a hallmark of good writing of horror movies is when people are forced to do things because there's truly no other recourse,
sure.
or you see them make a decision that's against their better interest because of blank reason, and so they have to do the thing you wouldn't do, and you can kind of like in your own head go like, that'd be really scary if I was in that position because I don't know what I would do either. I probably would have had to, maybe I would have had to go aboard the Event Horizon even though I know it's haunted, like whatever it is that you choose.
That's
I
why
always like
wanted.
those moments in movies, you know?
And that goes back to the original Alien, because that's a case where the entire premise, and this violates some storytelling rules, right? Like the whole hero's journey and being drawn into the adventure. The whole deal with Alien is these people are not on a rescue ship. They're not out there to save any. They're heading home from a mining operation, and they get woken up because they're required by space law to like answer this beacon on this planet, and they're not happy about it.
Right.
It's
Right.
like, it's not our job. We've been away from home for years, months. At this, we're exhausted. We want to get back. Like we want to get back. We want to get paid. And it's like, every minute space is miserable. Every minute you spend on a spaceship sucks. The food sucks. Everything about it, it's probably cold and uncomfortable. It's like, and so they're very grumpy, and then suddenly get drawn in, and I think it actually winds up working very well because their unwillingness to go above and beyond in studying the alien or collecting or doing anything like a scientist would do if they were
Right.
there to find the alien. So here they tried to do the same thing where the crew, there's only one person on the ship, which is Sam Neill, who knows why they're there. Because they are like a salvage crew or whatever. And the whole thing is you have that same scene, those same scenes early where they're like, well, why us? Why are you like, why won't you tell us why we're really here? Why do we care about? And that is a tricky thing when writing, because sometimes a reluctant protagonist or group of protagonists can be annoying because it's like, I'm watching your movie and you're complaining that you're in the movie.
Yeah.
It's
Just
like,
go to the basement already.
why do you not think it's super cool that this is the long lost Event Horizon? Whoa, we're going to solve the mystery of the Event Horizon. And that element isn't really there. And like, Lawrence Fishburne is it makes sense. He would want to put the safety of his own crew above like finding out why the ship is haunted. It's like, no, my job, like we came here, we found it. We found the answer to what happened, which is the crew went crazy and they killed each other. We're going home. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
I don't care about any of this other stuff. And so you have the conflict with Sam Neill's character who wants them to pursue it or whatever. But if it has a flaw, I do think it's there because they have multiple conversations about what they're supposed to do next. And there's a whole lot of him asking Sam Neill what happened and Sam Neill saying something to the effect of, oh, there's no time to explain, or I don't know. And it's clear he does know.
Yeah.
But and then there's the other thing where to add urgency, they add a ticking clock because their ship only has X amount of, is it oxygen they're going to run out of, or
fuel,
and they say they've got 20 hours. But then like 3 scenes later, they're like, how much time have we got left? Like 4 hours. You're like,
well, we all had to take a nap.
Did you guys go to sleep at some point?
Yeah. They're like, well, he was in the bathroom for a long time. Don't make fun of him. You'll have to wait for Sam Neill to get out of the bathroom.
I was gonna say, Jason, I think that's also it's a superhero trope these days where it's always like, Daredevil, stop being Daredevil. And he's like, you're right, maybe I shouldn't be Daredevil. And you're like, no,
we want you to be Daredevil.
We're all here to watch you be Daredevil. Those scenes aren't super fun, as necessary as they may be to create stakes or whatever. But it's that thing where they're like, they are immediately like, wow, the Event Horizon, that's insane. That ship is gone. That's an infamous thing. I don't want to deal with it. And you're like, oh, all right. Well. Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah. It's so funny. It's like, it goes to show that like a truly good horror movie that you can like believe, but isn't like too real world, is like threading such an unbelievably fine.
Yeah.
Like the needle is so hard to thread. Like it has to be people who aren't so brave and so stupid that they just walk in because you as the audience go, well, they're asking for it, those idiots. I don't care if a monster kills them. But they can't be so reluctant that you don't get to have the fun of the thing. And the monster has to have some justification, or else it's just, you know, like, I guess it's hell or whatever. But if it's too justified, then you have too many questions. And it's like, I don't know if there are other genres that have such an unbelievably tricky little balancing act in order to like truly please the audience and like quote unquote make sense, but not too much sense. You can still be scared and ask the right kinds of questions. Like it's
sure.
It is sort of a, when I feel like seeing a really good scary movie is like a miracle, honestly.
It is harder to pull off than what anybody appreciates. And I think one of my all-time favorite, the plots being structured correctly, is the original Night of the Living Dead. Where it has, now you watch it, it's like, oh, these are all of the zombie movie tropes. But when the characters, because it's a bunch of people who don't know each other, they've all landed in the same farmhouse because the dead are walking and attacking everybody. And they have a series of conversations where it's that same conflict that when movies do it badly, it's awful, where you've got like one character that's just a contrarian, and they, you know, and they refuse to believe anything or whatever, or they just needlessly refuse to go along, or they're defeatist or whatever. It's they're just add conflict. In here, it's so smartly written, and everybody remembers this as, well, it's the black and white zombie movie from the ancient days. Right. But if you watch it, it is a spectacular example. Like if I taught screenwriting, I would teach this movie in a screenwriting class. As these characters gather in this farmhouse and try to puzzle out what's happening. And it's like, what is attacking us? Well, it appears they're recently dead. Okay, well, how strong are they? How do you fight them? And they argue about what they should do. And everyone who argues is right, because there's no clear. So like one guy goes, let's run, there's a truck out back. Let's make a run for it, get in the truck and just drive. Like zombies can't be everywhere. Let's drive to the nearest. And another character's like, we don't know if that truck starts. We don't know if it has gas. If we get out there and it doesn't start, then we're dead. Because, you know, these things, we've watched one of them turn over a car. Like they can swarm you in a vehicle. It's like, and so another guy's like, no, like this is a farmhouse. There's windows everywhere. We don't have enough wood to board up all the windows. Let's get down in the basement. Another character's like, you get in that basement, there's one door in, there's one door out. Like if they get through that door, we're just trapped in there. Everyone is justified in what they're saying. Yeah. Everyone is smart. Everyone is competent. They bitterly disagree, but nobody is wrong. And in the end of the movie, it actually turns out the guy that wanted to go to the basement was correct, but they don't do that because the other correct character is like, no, you got to leave yourself an exit in case they do swarm the place, then we can get to the truck and that'll be our last hope. But we're going to try to barricade this best we can. it that is key to, it's a case where you can identify with everything everyone is saying. There's nobody is there just to be the obstacle for everybody. And I think Aliens does it well because the different soldiers everyone has different agendas, and the one guy who wants to study the aliens isn't wrong. It's an important new species. And Sigourney Weaver's character is just like, no, let's just bomb it from orbit. Let's bomb it from a distance so we can't even watch how they die. Let's just, and you're like, hey, if I was in her situation, I would absolutely want to do the same. I would not want to preserve this species for study. I would want to exterminate them because of what she had been through. It makes perfect sense. But that is very difficult to pull off. I know because I have tried it.
I feel like a classic movie or book or anything along those lines is like somebody's come up with a really good like thought experiment or problem solving sort of scenario, as opposed to like, this is just a movie. Like this is just going to be a series of tropes or whatever. But when somebody's come up with a really good, like I said, thought experiment, and the characters are there to argue like each approach to solving the problem, that's when you get a really good movie.
Yeah. Also, like, I enjoy in movies, specifically in like things that are horror tinged, like something like an Annihilation, where everybody is going into the mystery willingly, but they all hit their breaking point at different points.
Yes.
Because I feel like that's also very emotionally resonant, and you can't be like, well, logically I wouldn't be scared of that, and it's like, well, she's not you, so she's scared of that. Like, I think that's also a good device, and also intriguing to watch, and also emotional to watch, because you sort of can't help but put yourself in their shoes and be like, would this be my breaking point, or would I make it to the next obstacle? Do you know what I mean? But like, all of those people are going in willingly,
right?
But
they
Annihilation
hit a wall at some point.
Is a great example of not bothering to over-explain the weirdness, because it's like these characters don't know what's going on, so you, the audience, don't get to know either. There's no requirement that you have to spell it out. With It Follows, which I consider to be a modern horror masterpiece, that they never explained it. Like, I think in the hands of another writer or director, they would have like pulled out the book, and it's like, oh, this is the ghost of Sam Feeney, an infamous sex offender from 1960s who was murdered by the townspeople, and now he's declared that from the afterlife he's going to haunt anyone who has sex. It's like, no, the whole deal is like they're struggling to find out why this thing does what it does and how it does what it does, but they're just a bunch of kids.
Right.
They're just a bunch of kids, and you see them just like hanging around and looking at their phones. It's like there's a monster after you, but it's like, what are we supposed to do? Because I've seen people talk about, well, the creature in It Follows would be easy. All you have to do is get on a plane, fly to Japan. It's like, these people don't have the money for a ticket to Japan.
Right.
They don't have the papers to immigrate to Japan. It's like the entire thing that's scary is they're just regular people.
Yeah.
And they sit around and get bored, like, because their lives, when they're not being attacked by this monster, are just kind of just boredom. They don't have anything to do, and they don't have interesting jobs. And so, they just hang out and that's great, because it's like, that's so scary. They don't have the resources to go consult a demonologist, or to bring in a professional, or to go. Right. They just kind of hang out and do, and finally they just like stage this, this final confrontation with the thing, and it's very clumsy, like what they try to do, and their plan is kind of bad. But it's like, have you ever worked on a group project with 5 other college kids? It's they did their best. They tried to come to a consensus based on what they had observed, and it kind of
actually, one
work.
of my pet peeves is when people are like, how they choose to kill the monster is kind of stupid, and I'm like, they're kind of stupid. None of them are like, like monster experts. Like, they're just like doing what they have with where they live. Like,
that's
to
why,
me, it feels totally justified.
Yeah, that's why It Chapter 2 is so great, where they just bully the clown until it dies. That was really fun. If you guys have seen that movie.
But if we wanted to be more realistic, they would have still been about 15 years old. And they would have been like,
you're a dumb clown.
Yeah.
You got a big, stupid face.
Yeah. Why are you thin but still have a double chin? And it's like, I don't know. Don't ask me that question. Why are you mean, 15-year-old? Yeah, it's like
that's a movie where they find the great book of whatever, and they learn that the clowns are actually the thing from space, and then they still settle on bullying it to death. It's just kind of it is so tricky to because I think in general explaining is never going to be as fun as then what? Like, how do we defeat it? How do we operate in this thing? How do we survive? And that's the thing. I think a lot of these movies, a lot of horror movies, spend a lot of time being like, what we think is fun is that Sam Neill knows that it's a wormhole to hell, maybe, but he's keeping it secret. And you're just going to learn little bits of what the premise even is, rather than saying somebody just is like, oh, well, if it's a wormhole to hell, here's how you would defeat it. Like, that would have been really cool if somebody decides, yeah, I don't know, you have to forgive yourself and the wormhole closes. Or I mean, that would probably be pretty lame, but like something a little bit more thoughtful than, oh shit, oh god, so that's all. But I do agree that there were a lot of effective scenes, effective moments. I thought the first 20 minutes I was really on board with it. I was like, this is a really cool idea, and then it just sort of, for me, slipped away as I didn't really understand or care what was going on.
Well, let me give you an example. That great stunt we mentioned earlier, where Lawrence Fishburne flies through space because what's happening is he's trapped in this decompression chamber, and if you're in there and it decompresses, they've established that like your eyeballs explode and all your blood vessels pop, and you die like this horrific, gruesome death. Which I feel like there's some version where what happens to him is much more gruesome than what you see.
Yeah.
And then like his eyes explode and there's 0G blood globules floating around. Like, that's a visual that sells a movie. Like, right? The iconic thing that you're supposed to stick with you, that is that guy's eyes exploding in the vacuum chamber. And then Lawrence Fishburne comes in and swoops in, grabs the guy, tackles him through the airlock, and they shut the door right behind them. And the consequence of that is what? That guy, they take that guy and put him into like stasis because he's so horribly injured that he can't function.
They're just like, oh, he's in the ER now.
And then and that's it. That's where he is at the end of the movie when they get back home. Like, that's like, okay, I guess that's nice that guy, instead of dying, will just live the rest of his life with like burst blood vessels all over his body, and his brain probably has blood vessels that have exploded in there, and he probably is. I guess it's good that he at least is able to live out his life, or as much of a normal life as possible. But we didn't know that guy. It's not like that was the thing he had to do to save the one guy who could operate the ship so that they could do X, Y, and Z.
Totally. He just goes into cryo sleep for the rest of the movie.
It was a stunt that didn't affect the trajectory of the plot. So that's where, and again, maybe there was stuff cut, I don't know. But that's a good example of a case where we've got a cool scene in mind, but in terms of you, the viewer, if you watch a movie like Jaws, every tense thing that happens, it is perfectly clear what the consequences will be. Like, water starts coming into their boat. It's like, oh, water in boat sink, shark in water. It is, you don't have to ask, well, what's the consequence of water getting in the engine room? What problem does it cause? Like, it is crystal clear. The urgency of why everything they're doing and why they're doing it and what they're trying to do, and what it means that the thing they just tried to do failed, that those floater things didn't slow down the shark and that it got away and they couldn't now see its location. Like, exactly what that means. Again, I make it sound very simple. It is very difficult to do in reality when executing it in a movie. So if there's cases in this movie where it's like, well, a cool thing happened, or a scary thing happened, like we saw a child covered in maggots, what did that cause to happen? And then now what's the consequences of? And so it's like the ticking clock. Is it to where the ship becomes uninhabitable and we'll all die? Or is that the point to which the ship will return to hell and take us all back there? It's a case where I think a little bit more work on it could have made it an actual like classic that everybody remembers as being good. But it came out at the time, and boy, everybody hated it. It really was a bomb.
I was actually surprised to read some of the reviews from the time / like, retrospective-y type reviews that are like on, IMDb and stuff, not like the creme de la creme of reviews, but just like that's something I always look at first thing after we watch a movie for this podcast. It's just like what people feel about it. And because I kind of had a good time watching it, again, I'm not trying to defend it as the world's most perfect movie, but like had a way better time watching it than I thought I was going to. I was genuinely surprised by how many people seem to detest the movie. I don't think it is detestable. I think it's like not great, but like I don't know. It's really taking some big swings.
Jesse's got a heart out.
Yep.
I
I gotta run.
Let's before you go, do you have any alternate titles for us or closing thoughts?
I got you. The Funky Spaceman and Space Ghost. My only closing thought is that I love that this demon is essentially a hermit crab who's just sort of like crawling around its own universe, its own like dimension, just waiting for the right home to come by, and then this perfect weaponized satanic cathedral pops into existence. It's like, yeah, all right, this is my place. Okay, I gotta run. Thank you, Jason.
Sorry.
No, coming back, we have jettisoned Jesse from the show.
He was possessed by a demon. We had to get rid of him. It
turned
was
out
the
he
only way
had
for us to survive.
watched an entirely different movie, and he was very surprised to find out what we're talking about.
Speaking of, apparently there was a movie that came out directly after this movie called Sphere. That was like basically
Like
this movie
based on
plot for plot.
based on a Michael Crichton novel.
Well, there you go. But
of
it
all
like
things.
it had
I think I've read that one.
Justin Hoffman and Samuel L. Jackson, and it's like very, very, very similar to this movie, but also
Yes.
hated. So people also
And
hated that
also
one.
hate it. People keep trying. And again, as I said, that's a tragedy for me. This is my genre. I would love nothing more than that's my favorite part of the Doom, like the new Doom video games, is that in the cutscenes when you have the scientists having to say things to each other. Like so we're at 26% demon inhabitancy on this vessel. Like
Yeah.
like we have 14% more battery until the portal till hell will close.
Yeah.
And it's like these experts who have just accepted that this is now hell is a real place. We accidentally opened a portal there. We just got to deal with it, people. This is just where we are right now. And so they've got like their memos and reports going around the office. It's like hell portal.
Demon.
Yeah.
We are the portal levels have the evil levels on the lower decks have now dropped to 32%. We're happy to say. If you find yourself having hallucinations about guilt you feel from your past, please report to a supervisor.
Yeah, it's probably a hell demon.
Yeah, if you
and
see
not just
maggot
needing
children.
therapy.
Yes.
Not
Again, fill out the form. Don't just send an email saying you saw the vision. We have a form, people. You fill it out, including the details, so that we can file it away.
We cannot guarantee that if it is not submitted as a Google Doc, it will be read in a timely manner. I love that. I know this is not true of everything, but I quite frequently love when there's just the teensiest bit of bureaucracy attached to anything fantastical or sci-fi-y. I don't know why, but I'm always just like that's my genre. Like what you're saying of like, I wish it was done better. Like that's mine that I'm always like looking for and hoping is done well, where somebody's just like exactly that, where it's like, it is not enough to merely say the girl appeared to you in the television. You must fill out the Google Doc.
I mean,
or else it is not a formal complaint.
That's what Cabin in the Woods does in much more of a comedic way, but have you seen Cabin in the Woods?
Yeah.
That's one of the things that's great about that is the horror of the cannibal family, and then constantly cutting back to people in the room being like, I wanted the mermaid, there's something fun about it's so horrifying to the people in the thing, but it's so mundane to the people that have already accepted that they are like the servants of a bloodthirsty god.
Yeah.
And that's, even just that idea that, okay, 6,000 years ago, we had to do it this way, but we've gotten very efficient at serving our bloodthirsty God. That kind of thing is always really fun, where you get both the people that are experiencing it for the first time and are terrified, but also the people who are like, whatever, we just got to deal with it because we got to deal with it. So
this is my incredibly unpopular opinion. I would have liked Cabin in the Woods more if it wasn't a comedy. because it
Oh,
was so
interesting.
campy and so goofy. I think that it's extremely scary, the thought of that you're in that situation and that there's this corporate or government bureaucracy elsewhere where just watching you and waiting for it to play out because they've got this system in place and they know that everybody has to die except for one, that the one person remaining has to be a virgin or whatever. And that there's this cold, detached, because it's so similar to how our real lives go, that while there's an opioid epidemic somewhere, there's just a bunch of executives in a boardroom like saying, hey, in this one West Virginia town, we've sold 800,000 pills this week. That's great. The stock price has gone up 3% based on that. And that the absolute horror of these people's lives is just a cell on a spreadsheet elsewhere. I feel like that could have been played straight and it would have been terrifying, but maybe the idea is so like over the top that it just has to be a little bit campy. But
Belko Experiment is a little bit of that too. That's that James Gunn. It's like right. It's still also kind of funny, but it's Hunger Games, except that it's in an office building where they brought everybody there. And I can't remember what the point is or whatever, but like I don't remember why they're doing it.
The point is that you don't know you don't know why they're doing it. That's the whole thing.
It was also kind of the point of, oh my God, what was that movie we just watched? The M. Night Shyamalan one we just watched?
Oh, freaking
old.
The old beat.
Kind of old also.
Yeah. Right. Well, a little bit.
A case where, again, but that's where, not turn this into a podcast about old, but that's a case where it didn't need that explanation.
Twist. But it was kind of what it ended up being, of just being like, you're all just statistics on my spreadsheet. We're all just, it's all
and I can see why he thought that added a layer to it. But there it's a case where I feel like just the symbolism of, like time and the horror of what time does to your body. And
we all agreed on exactly that when we were talking
like
about
that's enough. And the same thing with, any movie or book that has like a time travel element into it, and they dig so hard into how the time travel mechanics work. It's like, well, a time travel plot is just about regret. It's just about like going back and seeing what you could have done different, or talking to your past self and understanding the mechanics of it are never what's important and never what's interesting about it. And that's why I kind of didn't like the way it was used in like the Avengers, the Endgame movie, because it almost became just like a mechanic to do like a clip show of your favorite hits from previous movies. It's like, hey, remember when this happened? Let's go back. Let's go watch this from our previous movie.
I actually think. So I was just going to say, just on time travel really quick, I actually think that's a very similar thing where it is to horror movies, where the fun thing about it to me is how do you solve the problem, or how do you, in Palm Springs, they have to accept that, whatever, their day is looping over and over and over. So they figure it out. They sort of explain it, like they figured out it's science or whatever. And then they blow themselves up and they fix it. It's same thing with Looper, where it's like, all right, we're just having to accept that in the past they're cutting our legs off and it's happening in real time. How do we work in this new world that we found ourselves in? And it's a little, in that one, it's the classic. Bruce Willis actually says, I don't want to talk about time travel shit. So they sort of breeze past that. But
what are you going to do? Argue with him? I can't say no.
Because he basically turns to the camera and says, it's just a waste of time. It doesn't matter. Like, we've got this problem to solve. That's what matters right now.
Totally.
But anyway, the point of all of this was getting into to what degree does it matter that you have to explain exactly what is happening or why. And I guess my issue is with this movie, I feel like the parts that they cut were like the smartest parts of it. And that's probably not true. Like that I think his goal was to make a Clive Barker movie, was to make a Hellraiser type movie, and then it got watered down. And I think in a movie like that, where the visuals are so far over the top, I think a lot of this other stuff that distracted me probably wouldn't matter, because it would be accepted that this is a story about a group of people on a ship who descend into hell. And hell comes into the ship and they get visions of it, and then they try to escape by dealing with their inner demons or whatever. This is a movie that I would be interested to see somebody try to reboot it. My whole thing is I think Hollywood should not reboot hits. I think they should reboot terrible movies.
Yeah.
This is why if I ran a studio, it would go broke within minutes of me running it, because it'd be like because I can name 100 movies that I almost loved. It's like, and it's like, The Devil's Advocate, I think had potential to be an all-time great movie, but I'm not sure I bought Keanu Reeves as an attorney. I don't know that was the perfect casting for that role. So here an Event Horizon reboot, but I think what somebody would tell me is like they've tried, Jason. Like everybody there's a video game called Dead Space. It is straight up just Event Horizon to the point where one of the weapons he uses just that riveter bolt gun thing that you see them use as a weapon. Like it's straight up the same. The design of the ship is the same. The gothic spiky spaceship stuff.
Totally.
It's all like it's basically Event Horizon, the video game. And that series, after 2 games, it also almost bankrupted their studio. So it is a very specific genre that I like, and I feel like it's never been done perfectly. But the lesson there is that it's really hard to make a movie. Anybody who watched Alien and you're like, oh gosh, it's such a simple premise, the unknown, and you're in space and it's contained, it's claustrophobic. It's like, gosh, horror doesn't have to be complicated. And I'm telling you, in the execution, it is unbelievably complicated. All of the little things with the sound design and the dripping water. That ship is so wet. Why is the ship so
Why
wet?
is it so wet? Why are all these ships so wet?
The ship is sweaty and it's tense. It adds to the tension that their ship is wet all the time. And it's just, you feel it's dark and drippy and there's chains hanging down from stuff. Right. And it all makes sense in Alien because it's like, this is a mining operation. It's dirty. Like they've been out there. This is all mining equipment. It's a filthy ship. The people are dirty. It's kind of ragged, and it's so masterful that seeing the probably hundreds of movies and TV shows and games that have been made since then, trying to play off that same aesthetic, and not 1 out of 100 pulls it off effectively, including the ones that were set underwater in the aftermath of the Abyss, which was kind of, encounter with aliens underwater. We can't go anywhere. We're cut off from the top because there's a hurricane above us and all of that stuff. The Abyss, infamous disaster, box office disaster. And that's the same guy. That's it's James Cameron, same one who did Aliens. And then there was a bunch of Abyss ripoffs called Deep Star 6. And there was a haunted submarine movie. I can't even remember what it was called now. At one point, someone says the line, "This submarine is haunted." One of my favorite lines of cinema history. Can't remember the name of the movie, but it's great. Anytime you can say in your movie that has somebody says the line, "The submarine is haunted," and they mean it, you've made yourself a movie that Jason will enjoy.
I love that. I also there are moments in movies that have become corny because of their prevalence, but when they're good, they're still good. You know what I mean? When the person looks up from the computer and is like, we have a problem. You know what I mean? Like that moment in a movie is so overdone that you can name 100 and you can name 100 times that it was bad too. But when you eventually land on the one where you're like, oh, good one, it still works. These things still kind of, you can't deny that certain things just kind of work.
We've not mentioned it before now, has one of my favorite movie moments ever, which is when they finally decode the footage of what happened to the crew, and it's them having an orgy of gore and blood, and they're having sex, violent group sex, and tearing off limbs and tearing out their eyeballs. And they bring Lawrence Fishburne in there because the character does the things you need to take a look at this.
Yeah.
And Lawrence Fishburne watches this happen and watches finally on the screen the previous crew having their blood gore orgy. He just turns it off, says, "We're leaving." He's just totally unaffected. Okay, just.
I mean, what else you can? That's such a good moment because it's you can see yourself in that moment being well, that's beyond my scope of my work. I'm gonna go home.
Yeah, whatever curiosity I felt here has been overpowered
totally replaced.
by that. somebody else can be the one to discover it. We are leaving.
Yeah.
So-
On that point, it's a different thing, but I did notice there are a couple of scenes where shit's exploding in one part of the ship while people on the other part of the ship are like, "Hey Jeff, are you okay? Jeff." And there one of the iPads with Lawrence Fishburne's face is like flying around in the explosion, but he's still on it. And I just thought it felt very practical effects to me. Like they must have either they like glued a picture of Lawrence Fishburne to a tablet, or there's actually a video file on there or something. And I just, for whatever reason, it distracted me because everything's so dark and explodey, but his face, well lit wherever he was, is like
Floating around.
just like because it looks like they very clearly blew shit up for real. Like the explosions
Mhm.
were
I get the sense that they worked a lot with
Crazy.
miniatures.
Yeah,
in
they
the-
blew
in
up
this
models.
movie,
That's
like-
how it used to be done.
Yeah.
It
And
looks
But
looks
that's
so
also why
much
it like
better.
looks really good. Like
Yeah.
almost anything that's still like a miniature that's well lit and well sort of designed, like tends to hold up really well.
yeah.
Like the Independence Day White House that they blew up. Like that's a
Right.
miniature.
Right.
That's, I say miniature, I mean it's like 20 feet long,
Right.
but it was
Right.
it was actually filled with tiny furniture, doll furniture, because they wanted
Ah.
tons of debris to blow
Right.
out. And here you can see it when they blow up the spaceship. You see the debris. It's like it's a model that's designed to be exploded, right? So it will
Right.
explode in a satisfying way. Looks so much better than the equivalent
CGI,
budget CGI
totally.
if they tried to do it CGI at the time. It just
I had I actually think you edited this article, Jason, but I was talking about that. There's that Red Faction guerrilla game where when you blew stuff up, there was like things splinter and bricks go everywhere. But most other games like Mercenaries, it'll just like there's an explosion and there's smoke and then it clears and there's the graphic of a destroyed building. And that feels like what we often get in CG. It's like the building's still there, and then we just kind of like put a CG version of now it's dead or whatever. Or maybe we built a CG thing over ruins or something, and we're just kind of obscuring or obfuscating our transition from one to the other, as opposed to just being like, it's the end of the movie, we got to blow up our model.
or when you see chunks of a skyscraper fall down, it feels like they're all using the same software because they all like collapse in the same way. Because and it's like, oh, they're using the same plugin that I'm sure is extremely expensive, very difficult to use, but like the way the glass falls off it, the way it's like, oh, this is an identical building collapse to the one we saw in Transformers, or the one we saw in 2012, or the one we saw.
Isn't it weird that you might not be able to put your finger on where you've seen it before, but there's something in your brain that goes, I don't believe this, I've seen this. Do you know what I mean? Like it's almost, it's like kind of almost an incredible human response that like you can be watching a movie about talking robots and go, I don't believe the way this building fell, because something in your brain goes, I've seen this already. I think they respect this from the tower falling in Lord of the Rings. You know what I mean? Like,
I think
there's something amazing about that. Weirdly,
I think too, it's like it's the hard work of animating. Like you can get photorealism in things. Like I think I've been seeing this in She-Hulk, where if she's not doing anything, it looks incredible. But as soon as she walks, you're like, that's not how things walk. I've never seen a 8-foot tall green woman lurch around.
But I don't think she'd walk that way.
And I think you get a similar thing with Transformers where you're like, I've never seen a robot make a heroic landing, but it doesn't feel like that's how the ground would react. You know what I mean? Like there's something, you still have to animate things well. And by that, I only mean like the physics of it. Like you can get the photorealism and all this stuff now, but then you're like, it's not how things move.
We are very, as animals, we are very hard to fool, which is like very interesting. Because like a good plot will immediately be like, sure, totally, demons, they're real. At least as long as I watch, at least for the next 2 hours while I watch this movie, I'm totally fooled. But the minute like the ground doesn't quite tilt the way you think it should, based on your experience of living on the planet, you're like, something's off. Like there's something very interesting about that. I wish we had like a psychologist who could explain that, but
well, for example, we mentioned Aliens. In Aliens, in the behind the scenes stuff, he talked about how a lot of the alien costumes, because the whole deal with Aliens is obviously, as you know from the title, instead of one alien, there's hundreds of them they're fighting. He's like, you would be shocked at how simple a lot of the alien costumes we used are. Because when they go up into the tunnel and they see a bunch of aliens crawling toward them, he's like, one thing we know is James Cameron speaking. He's like, the human eye only detects so many pixels of detail, but it detects movement very well, which is probably evolution, because being able to detect the movement of a predator through grass and through trees, that was more important than being able to detect what color the fur was on the predator
Totally.
or what color its eyes were, or anything like that. Just its movement signaled intention and danger. So he's like, a lot of these aliens were crawling through there. It's just a guy in like black tights with like the head and like a thing on the arms or something. As long as you could, and then they're all crawling toward you. And as long as you perceive those big shapes, and then the big thing for him was the performance. Because he's the stunt performers or the acrobats or whoever they use that are masters of like doing movement and movie movements. Like now those people would have like the tennis ball strapped to do them to do the mocap.
Right.
But he's like, no, it's all in the performance. And it's all in how these things move, and they're crawling toward you with intentionality. And it's like the actual detail of the costume, not that important. Well, something like Transformers, you know, you have these robots that have 100,000 moving parts in the CG, because they say that in the behind the scenes features, like all the little gears and stuff. Yeah, I think it's all wasted. I think your eye doesn't know where to go on that thing because it's so busy, and they think it's the opposite of what James Cameron said, that it's like, well, no, the key is the detail, making sure there's tiny little scratches in the paint to sell it as solid. And I think the movement is what sells it, something as being real, and that always will be true. That's why I think so many of us would prefer that they did the She-Hulks, but just paint her green and let her just leave her that same size.
Yeah.
And let this wonderful actress, let her performance sell the transformation. Because we watched a show called Orphan Black, which is what made her famous, where she played like
Plays a
27 different
bazillion
characters.
people. I know.
And does it masterfully and with perfect comic timing and everything else. It's like, let her perform as the Hulk and just make her green. But then again, the people that love that show probably say, well, that's why we're able to enjoy it. Like, the CGI doesn't distract us because she's so, you know, charismatic or whatever. But
yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that's why, you know, Andy Serkis has been sought after, is even if the Gollum or the monkey CGI doesn't hold up in its photorealism in a way that it would now that we've got 4K, as opposed to when Lord of the Rings actually released. The performance feels real. Even Avatar, for that matter. Like, I never, even though you know it's not real, it obviously looks great, but the way that they captured facial expressions and stuff sold it a lot better to my brain than anything that I see now most of the time for like fully CG characters. The way that he like whatever hooked all those cameras up to everybody's face or whatever, it really does seem. I think you're right, Jason. It's like the movement is always going to matter more than like pixel depth. So I think it's really good way to end something that we were barely talking about on Event Horizon. Unless you guys have any, I have only two observations I'm just going to throw out. One is when he had his little shrine to his wife, there were multiple duplicate photos, which I just thought was really funny. That he's like, I really like this one, so I have like
I'm gonna look at that one
cuts.
a lot.
Yeah, he's like,
also they don't live in a future in which everyone has 50,000 photos of themselves on their phone
at a given instant.
Right.
Yeah.
But he didn't even have 50 different photos of his wife in real life. He had the same one. He went to, you know, wherever 1 hour photo was like, can I get like 10 copies of this? And then the other one, I'm sure it didn't invent it. Is this one of the first movies to do the explaining wormholes with the fold and the pencil stab? Or has it been way predated by that?
In the book version of Sphere, I think that was in there. There's no way this movie was first, but it is now the standard way you explain
it. Yeah.
Faster than light travel is like you take a piece of paper and you go to point A, point B, but if you fold the paper, so you brought them together.
As soon as they were like, how is that even possible? I was like, ooh.
I know. I'm as smart as a space scientist.
Right. That was it for me. I'll just like one-offs. Do you guys have anything else you wanted to hit?
No.
And no, it's just, other than if you somehow have never seen this movie, I do think it's worth watching.
Sure.
And it's, if nothing else, to watch it and see if you can identify what's missing in it. It's got some kind of corny performances in a way that it makes me think that some of Sam Neill, I think he was acting thinking it was going to be kind of a goofball movie a little bit, but everybody else was taking it seriously. But
Very seriously.
and also, I don't know. I still feel like, I mean, there's nothing wrong with the career Paul W.S. Anderson has had. I'm not going to, say that he shouldn't have devoted his life to making like Resident Evil movies. That's his business. That's what he likes doing. But at one time, I think people saw this and thought, oh, this is the Mortal Kombat guy. Like, this is a much more, complicated and original movie. He's capable of doing something other than Mortal Kombat for the rest of his life. And instead it's like, nope, I'm going to do video game adaptations.
Yeah.
That's
I'm going to
my
make 6
thing.
Resident Evils.
That's right.
I
I
was actually going to say, just on the acting thing, he actually said the edit needed more time, and one of the things he cited was acting issues. So like maybe they even just took the wrong takes.
Right, that they didn't, that they
characters.
weren't using his favorite takes in a lot of
Right.
because again, it'd be very easy to see telling Sam Neill to do like the scream in a goofy way and then do it in a you're really scared kind of way, or
Right.
do it in a slasher, like I'm a victim in a slasher movie, in
Right.
a real, because so much of the writing gets finished in the editing bay. People at home didn't know that. You cannot overstate the degree to which the film's the final stage of writing the film occurs in the edit.
Yeah. And it also doesn't help that like what Lawrence Fishburne does in this movie, which is what he does so well anyway, is like a sort of grounded deadpanness. And so like in comparison to his performance, everybody looks a little goofy because he like never goes too big over the top.
Yeah.
And so
he's the guy who's so fully invested that the Matrix is real and that there's a religion behind this computer program.
You just believe it.
Yeah, you're like, I guess
like,
so.
sure, if you tell me that, whatever you say.
Which is, and then the perfect foil is Keanu Reeves, who's like, I don't know anything, man. People just tell me, and I just go along with it. Yeah, that's great. Cool. So we got any, Allie, you got any alternate titles for us?
I gotta be honest, I forgot.
Oh my God.
I'm
2
sorry.
in a row.
I really liked it. I was sort of, the more I like a movie, the less I think about alternate titles, because I'm just sort of like enjoying watching it and I like don't think about it.
That's fair. Jason, did you have any
I
SEO friendly?
Space Ghost, his suggestion was so
I mean,
good.
I think it's very funny.
The issue is that with horror, to be serious for a moment, you can never have a title that is too descriptive, because like here, Event Horizon, that's like the edge of a black hole or whatever.
Right.
This is a space term. They named this ship that because it was going to try to go into it would create a black hole of its own with the whole thing. But there's already a movie called Black Hole.
Right.
Right.
It's hellhole. Like all these, all of these are taken. And whereas your movie, like your ghost movie, is usually called something like, The Shining. Like what is that? What does that even mean? Well,
Right.
when you watch it, but it's a nonsense phrase, and the whole idea is that or it. Well, it could be anything. That's the idea.
Right.
It's extreme. What it is extremely complicated, but we're going to leave it mysterious. So
What about
no.
Dude, Where's My Spaceship? Parentheses. It's been gone for 7 years. End parentheses. Is that good?
Elegant. Yeah, in its simplicity. Yeah, well, I took a stab at it anyway. I had
Good.
I had Corpsicle, because at
Fun.
some point somebody
They
mentions
do say that.
Suck Through the Gateway.
So
this
you're
ship is-
explaining you're spoil. You can't put spoilers in the title.
Get
What
sucked
about-
off through the gateway because of all the sex.
Yeah, then I guess This Ship Is Fucked is probably too explanatory. I liked Baby Bear and Don't You Walk Away on Me, Mister, because that's a line that Lawrence Fishburne delivers straight.
Again, he delivers everything so straight. It's kind of his superpower. Like,
Don't you walk away on me, Mister, to Sam Neill, and you're like,
sure.
what? Like, were we worried about the language at this point? Like, I'm confused as to, like, he could say more than Mister. I don't know if that's supposed to be like disparaging because he's actually a doctor or something.
Oh
But,
yeah.
he's denigrating his position or something. But anyway, all right, that's pretty much it. So for those, this was probably a premiere again and not a live stream. We're doing more of those because when we have guests, they are not automatically free at 4 p.m. on Thursdays. So based on where we are, that's probably October. I have no idea what movie we're doing next, but you can subscribe to the Crack Movie Club on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and all these other places. And Jason, where can we find you and your book specifically?
You can find me on really any social media platform just by searching my name as it appears probably on your screen here. I'm at TikTok and Jason K. Pargin, same on Instagram. I'm on Twitter as something else, but you just put my name in, you'll find it. The book I'm here promoting is called If This Book Exists,
Yeah,
You're in the Wrong Universe. It's lime green. You can't miss it. This is available anywhere books sold in any format. If you've seen the movie John Dies at the End or read the books, that movie was based on books. If you didn't know that, I realize some people have no idea who I am who are watching this right now. But that movie is based on a book that I wrote years ago. It is a series. They are episodic. It's not serialized, so you can start with any of them if you are just curious and you only want to. If you only want to start with the most expensive new one,
Yes.
instead of going to a used bookstore and getting one for 50 cents, one of the previous 3 books, and you want to start here, hey, that's fine. Really, the more you pay for it, the better off I am and the book industry in general. And please, if you can get it from an actual brick and mortar bookstore, if you can find one, do that. I know you won't. I know you're going to get it off Amazon. I'm saying if you somehow find yourself out at a bookstore and you see this big lime green hardcover on the shelf, go ahead and get it there. They will appreciate it more than Amazon will.
Absolutely. I've read the first John Dies at the End and the first. What would you call the series? The futuristic violence in fancy suits. Is that the series?
Yeah,
or what do you call the series?
They're the Zoe Ash books, I guess.
Okay.
But yeah. I have two series that are and you can look at the reader reviews that are generally positive if you think we're lying to you, because of course we're going to tell you it's good. I have a financial vested interest in you believing
telling you it's good. Yeah.
But
good deal. Get the book.
Yeah.
Allie, where can we find you?
At Miss Alice Nutting at all the places that a person could find a person. Don't have a TikTok. Haven't been able to, psych myself up for having to create content on a daily basis. So, just
it's extremely draining.
Yes, it really, and to give of yourself.
It will ask a lot.
A real person of a real you is very difficult. And
and it will give back almost nothing.
Yes. And what's so funny is I went to acting school. And so actors love to talk about how hard it is to give of themselves and be present and in the moment and authentic and real, and how you need time to recharge and you can't just turn it on a dime, and it's an art and a craft. And then it's so funny to walk into this modern world where it's no, you can do that at any time. Accessing you is you. It's just fucking turn your camera on. And it's so funny to me because I've gone for such a long time of just being sorry, I got to go home and protect the instrument. I have to be myself tomorrow. And that instead now it's being yourself is actually extremely easy. Just turn a camera on at any time. And what comes out of you will be gold. It's whoa.
You will be,
I think both are wrong personally.
Competing for engagement with children who have been raised with the camera since age 5. They have had a camera they've been performing for. And they don't know how to live any other way. But that is the subject of a completely different and extremely depressing podcast episode.
Which I'd be happy to be a part of.
Yeah. And speaking of, I've given a lot of myself to this YouTube channel.
That's true. Can't deny that.
A lot of things that in retrospect probably weren't worth it. And speaking of, again, I'm just going to keep plugging it here because I know my bosses don't check. I have a YouTube channel, and someday I'm going to get all this contract stuff negotiated. There will be something there. I may be fired in the meantime, but I doubt my boss has watched an hour and 46 minutes into this to fact check me or to
drop your social security number. No one's watching.
Yeah. So, just like it in case someday something ever happens. Because I know the people that watch this far into the movie podcast are only the truly stupidly faithful. So we appreciate
Some of
you.
them are very bored.
Some of them are very bored.
faithful or
Just
bored, or
they
both.
left it on while they were doing the dishes, and they're
A
not close enough
high-
to the device to turn it off.
A high percentage of them are Indian viewers because of our RRR podcast that we did
Well, there
not
you
that
go.
long ago. So we actually Cracked has a really large Indian viewership in the past few months. So welcome. You can find me on Twitter at _J_breeding. I also can be Googled a few places. I don't have a TikTok yet because, again, legally, what am I allowed to do? Contracts, who knows? And that's it. We're going to say goodbye. So talk to you later. Thanks for watching. If anyone is still
If anyone's
here.
watching.